Introduction: Carl Jung and Jungian Analysis. Few people have had as much influence on modern psychology as Carl Jung. He coined terms such as extroversión and introversión, archetypes, soul and reason, shadow, and the collective unconscious, among others. He was a practicing psychiatrist and is considered as the founder of analytical psychology or Jungian analysis. In his early years he came in contact with Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalysis. They had a close relationship and collaborated on a shared vision of human psychology. However, their paths diverged as Jung, personal research in analytical psychology, and especially after the discovery of the collective unconscious, made it impossible for him to follow Freud's psychoanalysis. This led to a painful split after many years of cooperation. Jung's analytical psychology essentially gave birth to the empirical science of the psyche, which culminated in his magnum opus, Collected Works, written over a period of 60 years during his lifetime. Jung divides our psyche into three different spheres: consciousness, personal unconscious, and the collective unconscious. Consciousness consists of our field of awareness. All the experiences we are aware of form our ego. However, according to Jung, it is insignificant compared to the unconscious. The personal unconscious is individual for each person and consists of parts that, unique to our lives, thoughts that we don't know about, have forgotten, or that were suppressed because of their disturbing nature. On the other hand, the collective unconscious. This is the deepest part of our unconscious, which is genetically inherited, not formed. Personal experience. This is where the archetypes are located. Archetypes are universal patterns and images that are part of the collective unconscious. Jung believed that we inherit. These archetypes are just like how we inherit instinctive patterns of behavior. Jung was also an expert in the study of religious and mythological symbolism, working in both fields. These areas lead to the discovery of archetypes. Studying these cultural myths revealed similar patterns. He even found the same symbols in the dreams of patients suffering from schizophrenia, which reinforced the idea of archetypes and the collective unconscious. In addition to traveling throughout the United States and England, Jung visited East Africa, learn about indigenous peoples who have never come into contact with European culture. He also traveled to India, where he felt under the direct influence of a foreign culture. For the first time, Hinduism played an important role in his understanding of the role, symbolism, and the unconscious. Although Jung proposed a number of archetypes, such as father, mother, wise old man, hero, deceiver, and others, we will focus on what are considered to be the four main Jungian archetypes. Persona, shadow and anima / animus. Archetype número 1, the self. The first archetype is the self. To understand ourselves, we need to know how it is. Differs from the ego, which is part of the sphere of consciousness. Jung considers the self to be of higher rank than the ego. Ego is acquired during human life and is therefore a conscious factor. Theoretically, it is possible to completely describe the ego, but this will only mean a conscious personality, and not the overall picture, which would have to include the unconscious parts. The ego consists of somatic and mental factors. The somatic is the physical self, our body, and the mental refers to our inner self, to our mind. Both the somatic and a psychic has conscious and unconscious factors. The main characteristic of the ego is our individuality, which is a part of our consciousness. However, this is only a part of the personality, not the whole of it. The rest consists of unconscious, the sum of the conscious and the unconscious. This is what Jung calls the self, which constitutes the integral personality of a person. To achieve the self, Jung's central concept revolved around what he called individuation, or self-realization, the lifelong process of separating oneself from the personality of each person, conscious and unconscious elements. He believed that this was the main goal, psychological development of a person. Now we will delve into what Jung believed, the most important part of ourselves, unconscious.
Hirwime et persona, sadou, anima / animus.
Which have the most destructive effect on the ego. Person.
Archetype número 2 persona.
A persona known as the conformity archetype. It is an element of personality that arises for adaptive or personal reasons. Convenience. If you have certain masks that you put on in different situations, then this is to a person. Essentially, it hides our true self by pretending to be someone else, to who we really are. When we please other people with our personality, it leaves our negative traits that contradict our true self.
Forming or sadou. Archetype número 3 sadou. Sadou.
Jung argued that the shadow is the unknown darkness side of personality, while the contents of the personal unconscious are acquired during human life. The content of the collective unconscious is invariable. Archetypes that were present from the very beginning. Among the shadow, anima and animus, the most accessible and easy to perceive is the shadow, since it can be extracted from the contents of the personal unconscious. To be aware of the shadow, there must be a significant moral effort to acknowledge the dark sides of one's personality.
Real and genuine.
Although some features of one's own shadow may to be recognized, some are more resistant to moral control and prove almost impossible to exert influence. A person who is not aware of his psychological projection, a defense mechanism by which a person protects himself from the unconscious impulses that deny their existence in oneself and attribute them to others, ultimately create an illusory environment through which he turns the world into a copy of himself.
Aun un face.
Shadow plays an important role in balancing
Psyche in general.
Weak shadow adaptation leads to a low level of personality. In this case, the person behaves like a passive victim of his shadow, extremely worried. Opinions of others, walking persona. People who don't look directly at their shadow project them onto others, qualities that we often do not transfer to others, we have. We don't want to see it in ourselves. But to truly grow as a person, you need to integrate
Your shadow and balance y twist your persona.
A person can recognize the relative evil by nature, but he rarely has to face absolute evil. Meeting your shadow may appear in dreams, usually in the form of a person of the same gender as you do. It depends on each person's life experience, not on inheritance. In the collective unconscious,
Dissolution of the person and understanding.
the self-shadow is a central part of the individuation process. In the context of the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it must be Jekyll, the conscious individual, which integrates the shadow, and not the other way around. Otherwise you will become a slave to your autonomous shadow. The integration of the shadow marks the first stage, analytical process, without which the recognition of anima and animus is impossible. However, awareness of the shadow must be a continuous process throughout life.
Soul and reason. Archetype número 4 soul / soul.
Within the shadow there are two contrasexual figures, the anima and the animus. In the psyche of every man there is an unconscious feminine aspect called the anima, which, the personification of all female psychological tendencies, while in the psyche of every woman, there is an unconscious male aspect called the animus. In contrast to the shadow, which represents the personal unconscious through which its contents can be. To be conscious, the anima and animus are much further from consciousness and is rarely realized. The anima of a man is characterized by the feminine eros. He is passive, like a child seeking a protective and nourishing enchanted circle. Mother. while the feminine animus corresponds to the paternal logos, the principle of rationality. When a man integrates the anima into himself, it becomes eros, giving way to a more caring figure. When a woman integrates the animus, it becomes the logos, giving the woman the capacity for assertiveness.
And reflections.
Anima appears in dreams, visions, and fantasies. Taking on a personified form, she is a spontaneous product of the unconscious, not a substitute.
The image of the mother present in every man.
Thoughts, feelings, and effects live within us. That we would never have believed that such a thing was possible. This seems like complete fantasy to anyone who. I haven't experienced this myself yet, because a normal person knows what he thinks. The realization of the anima gives rise to a triad. Male subject, female subject.
Ante trascendental anima.
In a woman this gives rise to. They surpass reason.
Continuo escantent integration.
Collective unconscious, making them part of the self, through psychotherapy, introspection. And having the moral fortitude to change your own beliefs can have a significant impact on ourselves and give us a much stronger foundation in our psyche, helping us to overcome our daily difficulties and become much more aware who we really are, and that there are elements in our psyche
beyond our control